I told him I wanted to grow old with him but needed an open relationship. He suddenly left our town. Have you ever felt the urge to do something that was always on your mind and just let loose? Well, letting yourself go and letting your mind take control without discipline and just doing what you've always wanted to do. Well, I thought I was making myself feel alive again. I wanted to have that feeling that everyone has of being free again. I wanted to remind myself that you can also let loose or have fun while you are married. Have you ever shared your deepest desires with someone only to have them disappear from your life? Imagine telling someone you love that you want a future together but with the freedom to explore connections with others. That's what happened to me. I opened up about my need for an open relationship, hoping for understanding and acceptance. Instead, he vanished without a trace, leaving me wondering what went wrong. One thing I did wrong was that I always say what I feel without thinking about how you'll receive it or what you'll do about it. But as long as I've told you what I wanted you to know, in this case it was different. I didn't expect him to act the way he did. I thought that if I opened up to him, and I thought that if I told him how I felt, he'd understand, and we could sit down and discuss the issue in a civil way. Instead, he just packed up and left, to God knows where. I just couldn't believe him. I mean, yes, I loved him, but why would he act so childishly? I suppose because most people nowadays, especially women, some people lose themselves when they get married. They end up making marriages look like a union to someone's true self. Some people regret getting married because they can't do the things that made them happy. They become people they are not, and it kills them. It doesn't feel like you're truly free when you get married. It took a lot of courage for her to share her story, so I'm only open to advice, not judgments. She goes by Veronica Cooper, female 27, and her husband is Mike Andrews, male 37. They first met at a golf club estate. There was a business meeting that they had at the I was a waitress at the estate while playing golf. I was studying for my master's in psychology, so I was doing a side job while I was studying so that I could make ends meet and pay for my studies that day. I was assigned to work on the field, making sure that the business gurus they were well taken care of and had everything they needed. While I was catering for them, I made a mistake and accidentally dropped a drink on one of the businessmen's laps. He was pretty mad and called me stupid and other harsh names. I tried apologizing, but he wasn't having it. The guy wasn't having it, and he was pretty angry. Mike came to my rescue and spoke with the guy, telling him that it was a mistake and he would pay for the damage that I had done to the guy's golfing shorts. I didn't know what to say, so I just thanked Mike for the rescue. That day was the toughest day in my working history. I felt so small, humiliated, embarrassed, and stupid. It's really tough being a waitress because you always have to put a smile on your face. Even if you're not feeling well, or if a customer isn't happy with what you've served them. Then they call you names and say you're stupid. It's really hard working under those conditions. The customer is always right, even if they're the ones at fault. Some managers even fire waitresses because of a customer's complaint and tell the manager that the waitress's service is bad. It's hard to always try to be calm and keep on smiling, even when the situation doesn't allow you to. But you need the job, so you have to follow the rules and put your feelings aside anyway. In this job, you have to follow the rules and put your feelings aside anyway. As I kept apologizing to the arrogant businessmen, Mike told me to stop apologizing and go continue with my work. I have to admit, I was relieved when I was away from that arrogant man. Later on, Mike came to my working station and apologized for how his colleague was on his best behavior. But I still had to help him clean up that man's golfing shorts. I'd spilled an orange juice on them, and it was going to cost me almost all my salary, but I knew I had to clean up that man's shorts no matter what. Mike then asked him. I gave him my number so that he could call me when we needed to clean the golfing shorts. I was a bit reluctant at first, as I was only 20 and he was around 30. However, I eventually gave him my number because I figured that the guy was going to help me clean the arrogant man's golfing shorts. He called after 2 days. I was thinking about how I was going to afford golfing pants, and how I was going to get money to clean them. I met up with Mike at the mall. I'd bought new golfing shorts for the arrogant man. We got along well and chatted more through WhatsApp. Mike was a sweet, loving, and caring man. Mike was cocky, but in a good way. He was a great friend, advisor, and lunch date. 2 months after we started dating, he told me he wanted to grow old with me. I didn't understand what he meant until he asked me to be his girlfriend. I was at a loss for words, to be honest. He has everything he wants and needs, so why would he want to date someone as simple as me? We dated for about 8 months, and it was a great experience. He even took me to meet his parents. They were a really welcoming and loving family, especially his mother. She was such a sweetheart with a good heart, and his sister was just a breath of fresh air. She had the vibe that I needed, and she was my age, which was a bonus. I didn't have any friends, so Mike's sister, she was the best friend I'd ever had. My relationship with Mike was just bliss. It was exactly what I'd been praying for. He was like my answered prayers, even though I didn't know that he had anger issues and bipolar disorder. Mike always made sure that I was happy, secure, and had everything I needed. I really needed that guy. He even paid for my tuition fees. I'll be forever grateful for what he did for me. I don't have any family in Woodland, Singapore, so it was difficult for me to take Mike home to meet them. However, I introduced him to them via Skype, which was really helpful. After a year, I think. Mike proposed and I said yes, but I had my terms and conditions. He got confused when I said that I had terms and conditions, but he listened to me. I actually regret even starting to address my desires to him because I didn't like the outcome. It actually made me feel like I had driven the love of I was so caught up in my own desires and greed that I ended up losing sight of what I really needed in a relationship. I was still young and eager to explore different aspects of life. After years of dating, my husband and I decided to tie the knot. I was overjoyed. However, as time passed, I started feeling a bit bored, especially when my husband is always away on golfing trips, which are part of the Golf Nation tournament. I often find myself tempted to go out clubbing and doing something crazy and let loose just a bit before I reach my 30 seconds. However, I always manage to contain myself and not go out at all. I discipline myself. My temptation ends up being a thought, but my husband was away on a golfing trip. So I saw it as the perfect opportunity to break free from the monotony of my married life and have a little fun. I started by cleaning the house and doing some much-needed grocery shopping. As the day went on, I found myself feeling more and more restless. I felt the urge to let loose a little. I needed to open my relationship with Mike, but I didn't know how or where to start. I was scared of the outcome. I had so many what-ifs in my head, but I knew I needed to tell him about my desires. After a lot of thought, I decided to call Prudence, who I was working with. She's a female 29, and we went to the same university. She's the one who introduced me to the manager of the restaurant. I work for a catering company, and I got along with Prudence, who works there too. I asked her out, and she said yes. She wanted to introduce me to a new restaurant and a cool spot that had just opened not far from where we work. We decided to meet in town so that Prudence said she'd take me to the new spot. I didn't think much of it at the time, but it turned out she was actually taking me to the club. I didn't ask any questions because I trusted Prudence, and I was sure she wouldn't take me to a place that would harm me or get me into trouble with my husband. I really thought we were just going to eat and then go our separate ways. We agreed to have a few drinks and then part ways before sunset. However, Prudence and I ended up having lunch together and then drinking. I told her about my desires and how my husband had been absent lately. We enjoyed the music and the vibe. We had a couple of drinks, and 2 guys came over and asked us to join them because Prudence was so forward. She said yes when things got hectic. One of the guys came over to me and started complimenting me. He was very charming and a bit handsome, younger than me. Prudence suddenly said, "Let's move the party elsewhere." I really wished she hadn't said that, but I couldn't predict what was about to happen. I wanted to refuse, but at some point, I didn't want to leave Prudence with some guys we'd only just met, so I stayed and obeyed. I know that was a stupid move. I was married at the time, but I'd put my marriage life on hold and was enjoying the moment. We went to the Orchid Country Club Hotel, which was about 5 kilometers from the restaurant. As we were there drinking with the guys, I noticed that there were 2 of us and 2 of them. That meant that everyone had a partner. I started feeling a little uneasy, as I was the only one married amongst these people, and they were so relaxed. I have to say, those guys were funny, The guy who was giving me a compliment came to me as I was gazing at the view outside. He introduced himself as Gary Lawrence, male, 25 or 6. I'm not sure, but he had a way of. He made me feel comfortable. I realized I needed to loosen up a bit as I was feeling a bit of guilt. We started to talk about life and conspiracies, and we realized we had something in common. Drinks kept on coming, the music kept on playing, and our conversation kept getting deeper. I found myself drawn to his charming smile and kind eyes. He was just a breath of fresh air. We fell asleep on the couch, cuddling. I was grateful that nothing happened. At first I felt a mixture of guilt and excitement that nothing had happened, and I had an opportunity to let loose. I had never done anything like this before. I was drawn to his charming smile and kind eyes. He was just what I needed. We fell asleep on the couch, cuddling. I was grateful that nothing happened to us at first. I felt a mixture of guilt and excitement that nothing had happened, and I had an opportunity to let loose. I had never done anything like that before. I'd never done anything like that before, and I wasn't sure if I could ever forgive myself. But nothing happened, so why feel guilty? As the day went on, I found myself losing myself in the moment, and the guilt began to fade away. Our trip came to an end, and I knew that I had to go back to my boring house. Plus, my husband was coming back, so I had to go when I got home. I had found my husband already back, which was a surprise because I didn't expect him to be back earlier. Well, I guess he had beaten the traffic. He asked where I was coming from, so I told him that I told him I'd gone on a night out with the girls, but I left out the bit about the guy, because if I'd mentioned it, there'd have been trouble. Sometimes my husband and I would spend our weekends together, but it wasn't fun because he'd always be watching golf, and I'd be sitting with him reading a book, which was pretty much the last thing I wanted to do. I was thinking about the trip I'd been on with the girls. I'd been feeling neglected by my husband for quite some time. Even though he was around, he was always busy with work and never had time for me. I felt like I was just a mere obligation to him rather than a beloved partner. I have to be honest and say that I didn't find the girls' night boring. It was actually really enjoyable. I wish I could go back to that night and relive it. My husband was too busy with work and his golfing games to join us. Golf really isn't my thing. It's not very entertaining. It seems like it's a game for wealthy people. One day, a guy from the trip texted me on Instagram. I was surprised because I didn't know he was following me. I didn't ask him why he was texting me. I just replied to his messages, which were actually very good. I was feeling a bit bored at home, so I agreed to go to a party with a friend of my partner's. I was a bit unsure at first about telling my husband, but I really needed to get out and have some fun. I'd been cooped up in the house for too long. I'd been itching to let loose and have some fun, but I didn't want to do anything that would jeopardize our marriage. So that weekend was a great opportunity for me to let loose a little as soon as my husband was gone. I decided to take advantage of the situation. I put on my favorite dress, did my hair and makeup, and I waited for Harold to come and get me because that was the plan. When we got there, I could tell it was going to be a great night. There were so many people, and I guess it was friends and maybe colleagues. I spotted his friends that I had met during the night. They were with their partners, who were very friendly and full of fun. The music was blasting, everyone was having a great time, and they were minding their own business, which was exactly what I needed. It felt so freeing to be myself without worrying about what my husband would think the next day. I woke up feeling a bit hungover and regretful. I had a bit too much to drink the night before. I was worried that my husband would notice when he got back, but as I looked in the mirror, I saw a confident and carefree version of myself staring back. I realized that I didn't need to be perfect all the time, and that it was okay to let loose and have fun over the next few days. I continued to explore I made the most of my newfound freedom whenever my husband was either at work or playing golf. I kept chatting and going out with Gary. He really made me feel alive, and he also introduced me to new clubs and woodlands. I knew then that I had found my real self and finally become the person I had always wanted to be. Prudence and I would go out, but she respected my husband, so they didn't want to upset him. My friend treats Mike like he's God or something. Sometimes I thought she was fooling him or me to think that she respected my marriage. One happy morning, I woke up happy and in a great mood. That weekend, Simon and I had a very passionate and intimate moment. The night before, we had a lot of sex, so I decided to wait until morning to wake up early to prepare a nice breakfast for my husband, so we would get ready for the day as we had planned to go out together to pamper ourselves and try to bring back the spark that we once had before we got married. I was really happy to see that spark again, after a long time of him going out all the time. So that morning he came down the stairs wearing his golfing clothes and came down with his kit. I didn't understand why he was wearing them. I asked why he was wearing his golf clothes when we had plans for the day. He gave me a pretty bad excuse. His golf buddies had texted him about a game that was happening on the same day we had planned to spend together. I was pretty disappointed. I was really annoyed at him, but also at myself for thinking that Mike was actually going to choose me over his golfing games or his friends. I mean, why would someone promise to spend time with you and even reassure you that the day was only for us and that we were going to switch off our phones? He said he wouldn't get any messages, but then he switched on his phone and got a message from his friend about a game that was taking place just as we'd planned something else. He'd said he'd be free for lunch and dinner, so I was hoping Mike would be back by then. I decided to cook all of his favorite dishes for dinner. I had really missed my husband, and I thought that this would be the perfect time to tell my husband Mike about my desires. I prepared everything and even texted to come back home earlier. I knew that when I delivered my message, Mike would not act like any normal person would. I knew that when I told him about my desires, he wouldn't act like any normal person would. I just didn't know what the consequences would be. He came back earlier, just like I had asked him to. We ate over a light conversation, and I knew it was time to tell him. I was really hoping he'd understand why I needed what I needed. So, after dinner, I asked to speak to him before he went to bed. I told him I really wanted to grow old with him and start a family. I told him, and reassured him about what I was about to tell him. I didn't think that there was anything different between us because there wasn't. I said, I've been thinking that's how I began. My voice was a little hesitant yet determined. Mike and I want to spend the rest of our lives together. His eyes softened a little. He smiled, the corners of his lips curling up. I feel the same way, Ronnie. That's how he would call my name. You're my everything. I took a deep breath, gathering my courage. But I also felt like there's a part of me that's restless, craving something more. I want to explore, to experience different things, but I don't. I want to lose you. I want an open relationship. Mike's expression changed. He looked surprised and a little uncertain. I nodded. My heart was pounding. I wanted to be honest with him. I wanted to communicate openly about our desires and needs. I still wanted him in my life. I needed the freedom to grow and discover who I was outside of our relationship. I wanted the freedom to grow and discover who I was outside of our relationship. The silence between us was awkward. Mike went on a quiet mode after I told him I wanted to explore my sexuality. He finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. He said he didn't know if he could do that. He thought we were meant to be together. Together, just us against the world. Tears welled up in my eyes as she reached for Mike's hand. It was harder than I had anticipated. Please, Mike. This doesn't change how much I love you, but I need this. I need to explore this part of myself. Mike roughly withdrew his hand, his gaze distant. I need some time to think. Veronica? I can't make any promises right now. I knew that our relationship was in trouble, so I had to be prepared for anything from Mike. I first told him that I wanted us to explore new opportunities. I suggested that we open our relationship to any opportunities that came up. I told him that I wanted to open our relationship and he was calm about it, which I took to mean that he was angry. I told him that I was ready to start a family with him and that I was ready to have a child with him. I basically told him that if he agreed to open our relationship, we would start planning for a child. I told him all about my desires and what could help our marriage have that spark. Our marriage was already in a bad place. It was a difficult situation, so I had to find a solution that would help us. He wasn't open to hearing anything after that. He suspected that I had been cheating on him and assumed that since I wanted to open our marriage or relationship, I was already cheating on him. I tried explaining everything in detail to him, but he didn't want to hear it and ended up calling me names. He even said that if he ever found out that I'd cheated on him, he'd make sure I suffered for the rest of my life. I just didn't understand why he was suddenly angry for addressing the underlying problem that we were facing. I told him we had a big argument about my desires. We were both angry and I thought Mike was being unfair and inconsiderate of my needs. But I couldn't tell because he was already enraged and ready to attack. I gave him some space to at least digest what I had just told him, I hoped that he would wake up the following day feeling better and that we would have a civil conversation like adults and married couples. The following day he woke up early and prepared for work. I tried making a conversation with him, but he didn't want anything to do with me because he didn't even eat his breakfast that I had made. I really thought Mike was being childish and inconsiderate. Why would I stay in an unhappy marriage, or maybe let's say an unsatisfied marriage, while I knew I had to address the issue with my partner? I actually respected him enough to cheat on him and open my marriage. I decided to go out for a bit to get some fresh air. I figured that by the time Mike got back, I'd be in a better mood, and we could continue the conversation. Mike was back from work, and he came into the living room looking like he was ready to kill. His face and body language were full of rage. He was really angry. I couldn't even think that he might have found out about my infidelity, so he looked at me with angry eyes. He asked to speak with me in private, without thinking about what would have made him so angry. I followed him to our bedroom. When we got there, he threw a phone. I was confused about why he would throw a phone at me, so I looked at him, hoping to get the answer I had been asking myself. Instead, he told me to press play on the video that was posted on Twitter. I did as he asked, without thinking, because I wanted to see what had made my husband angry. When I pressed play, I saw a video of me and Harold making out at his friend's house. The video was trending. I was shocked and didn't know what to say. I was blown away. Harold had posted a video of him and me making out at his friend's house. The worst part? The video was trending. I was shaking and trembling. I was lost for words. I couldn't even think of an apology because I didn't know what was going on. I had thought that nothing had happened between us. Gary and I watched the video together and it really confused us. Why didn't I remember anything? Mike was really upset and asked if that was why I wanted to open our marriage so that I could do those nasty things. My heart was beating so fast, like I was having a panic attack or a minor heart attack. I was really shocked because I didn't remember anything. I couldn't believe that someone would post a video like that on social media. I felt like my reputation, dignity, and image were being ruined. I didn't know what to do, so I went to the park to calm down. I went back to the house after about 4 or 5 hours to calm down. I had been trying to digest and think about the video that was trending, and the fact that I didn't remember anything. I wanted to know who had leaked the video. I knew I needed to find out, but I was in a daze. I was really taken aback. When I got home, Mike wasn't there. I called out his name and tried to call him, but there was no answer. His phone was suddenly off, taking me straight to voicemail. I left him a lot of messages, including voice and text messages. He actually left me a letter. It said that I should sleep with one eye open because I had made him angry and he was going to destroy me. Which made me really scared because I didn't know what he was referring to or what he would do. You should never trust an angry lion because it can bite you roughly to a point that you would eventually find yourself useless. And he wanted to end things or disappear. With the words that I had said, Mike vanished from Woodlands, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and shattered dreams. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months, but there was no sign of him. I searched every corner of our small town, hoping for a glimpse of him. I kept seeing his face, but he was always out of reach, as if he'd disappeared into the vastness of the world beyond. I tried calling again, but it was the same old story. My mind was racing, and my heart was pounding so much I felt myself suffocating, but I knew that I had to find Mike first so that I could explain to him what had happened. The next night I tried tracking his phone using my computer, because we had an agreement to track each other's whereabouts using either our phones or car trackers. When I checked, I found that his phone was off and his car was actually in the garage. 2 weeks later, I'd given up looking for Mike. I was worried about him. I won't lie. He'd left without saying anything, besides the threatening letter he'd left. I decided to go to the shops and buy some household essentials and groceries. I was busy putting things in a trolley when I bumped into Gary. I got pretty angry. I confronted him about the video again and he told me that his friend had leaked it with help from his new girlfriend. I was really shocked because I had thought that Prudence was on my side, but it seems she was just as bad as the others. I knew Mike's sister had seen the video and that his parents were probably aware of it too. I had damaged the relationship I had built up with Mike's parents. So I decided to go to his house to apologize for the distress I had caused them and the embarrassment I had caused Mike. I had caused my husband a lot of trouble. I didn't know what I would say to Mike's sister. I decided to apologize to the parents. Unfortunately, when I got there, Mike was not home. His mother told me that he hadn't been at home for a month, so they didn't know where he had gone. I felt really worried about Mike and felt guilty. A week later, I got a notification that someone had withdrawn money from my offshore account, which was my life savings. I didn't even notice that my cards were gone at first, so I panicked and thought I was being scammed. It wasn't enough. A truck came by, a big one, and repossessed the cars that were in the garage. My car, along with Mike's. I asked why they were taking the cars. They told me that they were reported as stolen and that they were no longer getting paid for them. I just couldn't believe it. I tried calling Mike again, but it still wasn't going through. I went straight into a bad mood and started to feel like I was losing it. After the cars were gone, I received divorce papers stating that the owner of the house wanted me gone within 2 days. My health wasn't helping matters. I was at my wit's end. Everything was just too much. I had lost the only person who had shown me genuine love. I was happy in my marriage, but my greed and desires clouded all the good things that Mike had done for me. I knew that I had to think of where I was going to go because I had no relatives in Singapore. I had to try. I had to find a way to get home to England. I was lucky that Mike had taught me to keep some cash in a safe place just in case I got into trouble or something happened. I took that money and bought a plane ticket. I couldn't stay any longer in Singapore. I had thought that I was done with everything that made me move there. I went to Singapore to study, and I did, thanks to Mike. I got my master's in psychology. I left Singapore with a heavy heart. I never thought my desires would lead me to that kind of stage in life. I lost the love of my life. He just vanished from our town. I wanted to know where he was and if he was okay. That's what happened to me. I laid my heart on the line expressing my hopes and needs, but he just vanished from our town without a word. It left me questioning everything, the sincerity of his feelings, the strength of our connection. I was left with a mix of emotions, hurt, confused, and a little angry. But I realized that it's important to be true to yourself and your needs, even if it means facing difficult situations. Over time, I learned to live with the pain in my heart, the bittersweet reminder of a love that was once so pure and unyielding. Even though Mike wasn't around anymore, I held on to the memories we shared, grateful for the time we had together, however short it may have been. I really thought Mike would understand my problems, but I now regret even opening my mouth and confessing about my desires. I really don't know where to start looking for Mike because I feel like I owe him an apology for the heartache that I had caused. Do you think he can maybe forgive me and give me a chance to at least mend our relationship after what had happened? I truly regret what I had done to Mike. I need any advice that you can give me. Please help me. I'm drowning, really.